Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Vanessa Markov. I'm the Communications Manager for SoCast, Inc., and I will be presenting this webinar today. So we're going to be talking about how radio stations can effectively engage audiences in Facebook and Twitter. Before I start, if you have any issues hearing me or if I'm going too fast, please let me know in the chat section of your control panel. We're also going to be holding a Q&A afterwards, so please submit your questions via the question pane of your control panel, and I will address them following the webinar. So the purpose of this webinar, as I mentioned, is how to increase engagement in social media. We're going to speak specifically about how radio should be taking advantage of social media, and we're going to show you some examples from radio stations for some actionable ideas that you can use. We're also going to talk a little bit about the importance of data and how to extract value from social insights. Finally, we are going to cover some tools and tips to increase staff efficiency when you begin your social media strategy. So this is our agenda. We're going to start off with talking a little bit about why social. The first rule is talk with your audience, not at them. The second rule is optimize your posts for peak engagement. Rule 3 is integrating contest and promotion. And rule number 4 is mining social for big data. Then we're going to talk a little bit about helpful tools and key takeaways, followed by our Q&A session. So the presentation is roughly 30 slides and should last approximately half an hour before we launch the Q&A. So to start things off, we have to ask the question, why social? The short answer is that your audience spends time in social and will talk about you whether you're there or not. Social networks also have access to a plethora of data that is extremely valuable to media companies, which we're going to cover a little bit later on. So before we start, we're going to launch a quick poll, which is actually a quiz. Let me just launch it here. And the question is, how many North Americans who have access to the internet do you think engage in social networking? Less than 10%, 10 to 25, 25 to 50%, 50 to 75, or more than 75? I'll just give everyone a minute to answer that. So we're taking a look at the results here, and the majority of you said more than 75%. You're absolutely correct. Let's just move on to our next slide here. More than half of the local online web population engage in social. But if we look at North America, that number jumps up to between 94 and 98%. Pretty much every single person who uses the internet in North America is engaging in social, which is a pretty staggering number. So here we see that nearly 1 in 5 minutes spent online is spent on social networks. 20% of all time being spent online is in social. What's even more interesting than that, actually, is that you can see people are spending more time in social than they are using search engines, which pretty much means that people are discovering content in social more than they are in Google. It makes your social presence just as important, if not more important, than your website presence. So in this webinar, we're focusing on the two most popular social networks, Facebook and Twitter. As you can see, social networkers spend 3/4 of their time in Facebook alone. Additionally, Facebook accounts for 1 in 7 minutes of all time spent online. As for Twitter, 10% of global internet users access this network. It might not seem like such a high percentage, but keep in mind there are 2.5 billion internet users worldwide, about 250 to 300 million of those in North America. So let's get started. We have 4 rules that will make it pretty easy for you to increase engagement online if you follow them correctly. Rule number 1, talk with your audience, not at them. Basically, social networks are not bulletin boards, so if your posts are not being interacted with in some kind of conversation, they're more than likely falling on deaf ears, or in this case, blind eyes. Instead, social facilitates and extends on-air discussion topics. They allow you to take on-air content beyond the time limit and into social, where it can last forever. It's also important to understand that people don't want to be marketed to when they're social networking. It's a social environment. It doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't market your brand. In fact, it's the opposite. You should be careful about how you're packaging your message to make sure it's coming across as social and not as direct advertising. There's actually a social media marketing expert that summed it up perfectly when he said, social media marketing is taking a brand message and disguising it as a message from a friend. It's basically modern word of mouth. Excuse me. Finally, your jocks should be using social during, before, and after their shifts. We've heard so many stations that have completely different staff managing their online communities. And that's fine, so long as their message is consistently aligned with the on-air brand. However, we still believe that your jocks represent your brand's best. They are your personalities. Therefore, they should be interacting with all your audiences, on-air and online. So use them. So here's a great example of effective two-way communication that extended a piece of on-air content. The morning show of this medium market station, 91.5 The Beat, what they do is a daily on-air advice panel. So a caller calls in, gives them an issue, and the jocks give their advice. When the bid is over, the station posts the caller's question to Facebook and lets the audience continue to discuss the topic all day long. As you can see here, this one post generated 150 comments, and this happens on a daily basis. Sometimes there's 100 comments, sometimes there's 300 comments. Obviously depends on the topic, but in doing so, they are extending their on-air content and engaging many people in Facebook on a daily basis. Another more obvious example of two-way communication is simply to ask questions. Statistics show that posts with questions get 100% more comments than Facebook. This example here is from a rock station. They show a question that garnered well over 1,000 comments, plus hundreds of likes and shares. If you just take a look at the bottom left corner there, over 50,000 people saw this post due to the reach of being liked, shared, and commented on by the fans. So this particular post was reaching well beyond the audience of the fan page alone. Here's a little side note. When you're asking questions on Facebook, don't write and then abandon a post. Try to interact with people by responding to the more interesting comments, or if people ask questions, answer them. If you take a look at the top answer to this particular post, there's an answer here by Barry Smith, and it was quite humorous. His question got over, or the answer to his question got over 40 likes. In a way, this identifies him as an influencer, so it would have been wise for the station to respond to his comment or even mention it on air. Rule number 2, optimize your post for the network you're using and for your target audience. We're going to get into specifics, but first there are a few do's and don'ts that are universal across all social media. 1, do mix up instant and pre-scheduled posts. It makes things easier for you. It's less hectic. At the same time, you maintain authentic live interaction rather than just having a slew of scheduled posts. Keep it mixed up. Secondly, do monitor posts at all times. Being timely is very important. People move very quickly and they want information as quickly as possible. So you don't want to miss out on anything, positive or negative, that's happening on your page. Also, do consider the quality of your post as much as the quantity. They're equally as important. We're going to show you some examples of quality posts soon, and we're also going to show you exactly why frequency is very, very crucial to engagement levels. Do not link your Facebook and Twitter accounts to each other. This is absolutely crucial. These two networks are completely different, and it might seem like an easy shortcut, but it's not doing you, your brand, or your audience any good to carbon copy messages to two different networks. It's fine to post the same type of message or content, but how you craft that post is very important to how people in that particular network are going to engage with you. Excuse me. Do not ignore or delete comments and messages. Goes hand in hand with monitoring. When you ignore relevant questions and comments, it hurts your brand. That's why social media is a two-way platform, so that people can speak and comment and ask, and people can respond and speak and discuss. When it comes to deleting comments, it's a huge no-no unless it's absolutely necessary. The reason why is that transparency is more important than censorship in social media. So you should only be deleting posts when no other resolution is possible, such as in the case of extreme vulgarity or spam. So let's start with some tips on Facebook best practices. The following types of posts are known to generate the highest amount of engagement for this particular network. So the first one is obvious, teasers and offers with partial information. On the left is another example from 91.5 The Beat. What they did here is they gave partial information about a study and asked their fans to guess the answer both on air and online. A little bit later on, after a caller guessed correctly, the station posted a link to the answer. On the right is a slightly different type of example by 99.3 The Fox. What they did is they posted a teaser about a new live show, but told fans that they had to figure out which theater it was playing in rather than just telling them. Several people shared the post and about 150 people liked it. So aside from being engaging, this is actually a particularly clever way to work with advertisers to generate buzz and interest without directly advertising. Posts with images. Statistics show that posts with visuals generate 53% more likes, 104% more comments, and 84% more click-throughs than text-based posts. And there are two ways that you can post visuals. The example you see on the left by Classic Rock 101 is a post where the main focus is the image itself. You can see people shared and liked this post over 600 times. On the right is a different example by Country 103.9, where the image is actually supplementary to the text. This is an excellent example of how images boost engagement because if you look at the question, it's not something that nearly 500 people would be interested in sharing. So instead, what they did is they attached a fun image to support the question to get a major boost in engagement. And they also ended up racking up over 50 replies to the question. Most people probably wouldn't have even seen the question and skimmed over it if there wasn't some image that had something to do with a cat involved. Finally, the reason why mobile-friendly is up there in brackets is because 70% of Facebook users access the network via mobile. So it's really important to remember not to post images that are too small or too detailed to be properly viewed on a mobile device. Another way to increase engagement is to be positive, humorous, inspiring, or exciting. The reason these posts work is because they evoke emotion, and people react to emotion. It's as simple as that. On the left is another example by The Beat. It's a sweet story about a World War II vet that nearly 600 people liked and 100 people shared. On the right is a slightly different type of post. It's a funny flowchart by Q107 Classic Rock. And the reason why it's funny and why it got over 100 likes and shares is because it resonated with the target audience. The last Facebook best practice we're going to cover today is to post links to external content. External content can come from anywhere, but it also provides you an opportunity to drive more traffic to your own website. So as content curators on air, online, you can rack up high engagement by posting links to topics and news discussed on air, as well as your proprietary content such as DJ blogs and event listings. Also note that the above two examples include images as well as links. This grabs people's attention and further contributes to engagement. So you can easily mix and match a lot of these tips to work together to really optimize your posts for peak engagement. So let's move on to Twitter best practices. You'll see immediately that the rules are very different than Facebook. First off, posts with links are known to generate 85% more retweets than posts without links. People on Twitter like to share information, but there's only so much you can say in 140 characters, which is why links to external content works really well. It's also a good idea to shorten your URLs via services like Bitly, and there's a few reasons why. First, they'll take up less of that precious Twitter space. They'll also generate more retweets, as we just discussed. And you're also able to track Bitly links to see how many people are actually clicking on them. And that way you can compare how many people are clicking versus how many are retweeting it to better gauge exactly how interesting your content is and how shareable it is. Questions, facts, and figures are huge on Twitter. They're some of the most popular types of tweets. There's actually a Twitter account called UberFacts that only tweets random, fun, and interesting facts to their followers, and they have over 5 million of them. It goes to show how important facts and figures, how popular they are on Twitter. Questions are also great for obvious reasons. They won't generate many retweets, but they will engage your audience in conversation. So there's different types of posts you can create to get different types of engagement in Twitter. Mentions and hashtags. Hashtags are a great way to find new audiences because your post becomes visible to anybody who looks up that hashtag, whether they're in your audience or not. Using existing hashtags rather than creating your own will help you tap into new audiences, and most particularly if they're trending topics. If you're unfamiliar with trending topics, there's actually a list of them, and it's updated frequently on your Twitter homepage. And even better than that is they're actually sorted according to your location. So you can pick which city you're in and find out what's trending in your area so you can engage in conversations that are relevant to your market. Mentions, of course, are also highly engaging because the people you mention are going to love that. Your fans will love that you're talking about them, and they'll most likely retweet it to their followers. And finally, for Twitter, clear calls to action are very important. Spelling out your expectations in a post is statistically proven to increase engagement on Twitter, as you can see here. If you want people to retweet, tell them. Ask them to retweet. If you want them to answer a question, click a link or favorite your post. Spell it out. Tell them to do it, and they're more likely to do so. So do frequency and timing matter? Short answer is yes, capital yes. Here's an experiment that proves the effectiveness of frequent posting. What happened was CFMI wanted to boost their engagement in Facebook. So for 60 days, they increased their posting frequency from a couple of times a day to a couple of times an hour. Prior to the experiment, as you can see, the station had 20,000 fans and 15,000 people talking about this, or PTAT. This is actually a very important statistic that we'll talk about a little bit later on. So here are the results, and it's in comparison to other stations and markets that did not participate in this experiment. CFMI generated 5,000 new fans and increased their engagement levels, or PTAT, by more than 30,000 people, and that turned out to extend beyond their audience. So because people were so engaged, people who were already fans, they were really sharing this content out to their own networks, and a lot more people were seeing the content coming from CFMI. So this experiment happened about 2 years ago, and what happened since then? Obviously, the station saw the immediate results that they got in only 2 months' time, so they adopted the strategy, continued to monitor and optimize the posts, and as a result, they've continued to increase their fans and engagement. As you can see here, they have now 45,000 fans and over 50,000 people talking about them at a given time. And we keep a close eye on the station, and they consistently have a higher PTAT number than they do audience number, which is fantastic and definitely something every station should aim for. Rule number 3, social promotion. 35% of Facebook fans like a page so they can enter contests, and 45% like a page for access to coupons and discounts. This pretty much indicates that a large group of people seek contests, coupons, and offers from brand pages in Facebook. So there's really no reason why you shouldn't be offering them. It's also a really good opportunity for your advertisers. If people are looking for offers and coupons in Facebook, then they're not going to be offended when you offer them. They're actually seeking them. Also, third-party apps for contesting are more flexible and provide more valuable data. So if you're not familiar with the way third-party apps work, don't get them mixed up with mobile or standalone applications. What it is a contest that lives on its own tab on your Facebook page, and it allows you to run various types of contests and extract data from your entrants. Finally, you need to stay informed of Facebook contest rules. They change constantly. Most third-party contest engines are aware of this, and they're ahead of the herd in understanding Facebook rules and regulations, which can be very daunting and detailed. For example, the rules changed just a couple of months ago that now allow contests where you can post something and ask people to like or comment on a post to win. a couple of months ago, if you did that, your page could be deleted. And we had some horror stories of radio stations that just didn't quite follow the rules and had their pages taken down, and they couldn't restore them as a result. And now that's changed. And it's good news. However, these types of contests still offer no data other than engagement statistics. So it does add some versatility, but third-party apps still tend to be at the leading edge because they allow you to use entry forms. And with those entry forms, you can gather data from your users and increase your proprietary membership database. And if you're not familiar with the way Facebook contests and third-party apps work, we can talk about it after the webinar. I'd be happy to discuss it with you. There's lots of information that we can provide about how these contests work. So we're going to cover a really good example of what can happen when you use a third-party contest app in Facebook. This is a station out in Denmark called Scala FM. And they launched a contest earlier this year where users had to upload an image of themselves referencing the station and then get their friends to vote on the picture. The entrant or photo with the highest votes got to win a meet and greet with One Direction. So it was a pretty big prize. And the station's strategy was actually to use a predetermined contest with this prizing to increase brand awareness, their user database, and their online engagement as well. Just simply running an on-air sweepstakes wouldn't have allowed for this. The contest app actually facilitated increases across the board, and I'll show you in a minute. Starting off, within 5 days, over 800 names were added to their database, and their page generated over 8,000 new fans. Their engagement also skyrocketed. As you can see before the contest, their average post was getting 2 to 5 shares, 10 to 100 likes, 50 comments, which is still pretty good. But during the contest, those numbers jumped 820%, 600%, and almost 3,000% respectively. So you can see here, this is a mix of a smart strategy, using a contest app and having great prizing, and it led to an extremely successful contest. And this was run in, like I said, only 5 days, and the contest itself took less than a day to put together, possibly even hours. So rule number 4 is probably the most important of them all, collecting data. Without collecting data, you're really not doing much for your business. First off, you need to know the difference between vanity metrics and valuable metrics, and we're going to go into detail on that in a minute. Second, you must be monitoring results and course correct as you go. Finally, these last 2 points here have dollar signs beside them for a reason. Mining data from social profiles and taking ownership of that information is not only important to your social and marketing strategy, it's important to your sales strategy as well. The reason why is because the more information you have on your audience, the better you understand and can segment them. And that makes your on-air and online inventory more valuable, gives you an edge over your competitors. This webinar isn't exactly sales-focused, but if you're interested in learning more about how social can increase your ad revenue, let me know and I'll forward some resources on this topic. We've got tons of information on monetizing social. So you might be familiar with the term vanity metric. It's a really popular term when talking about social data. Basically, a vanity metric is a number that's pretty much meaningless if it's not somehow correlated with high engagement. So some examples of vanity metrics: how many fans you have, how many followers you have, how many times you post, how many times you tweet. And these are all good to look at, but they generally mean nothing if you're not looking at the valuable metrics that are associated with these. So going back to talking about this, or PTAT, what that means is, as I mentioned before, it's a combination of how many people are interacting with your content at any given time, how many people see it. So if somebody shares a piece of content from your page and then one of their friends comments on it, they get added to that PTAT. That's how you can end up with a higher PTAT number than your fan count. Also, when it comes to Twitter and Facebook, mentions, comments, likes, shares, retweets, and favorites, these are all metrics that should be more important to you than the quantity of fans and followers you have. You can have 50,000 fans, but if they're not engaging with your content, they're essentially, that number is useless to you. So by monitoring and analyzing posts as you go, you're able to course correct. There are third-party services available that can let you track your individual posts for insights on what type of content engages your audience the most. You can also track peak engagement hours to determine when you should be more active and when you should post your highest quality content. There are guides out there that say the best time to post to Facebook is and the best time to post to Twitter is. And they're good guides to get you started, but really you want to know when your audience is online, not when the average or the majority of people are online. There are millions, hundreds of millions, billions of people using Facebook and Twitter. So, knowing their average times is not as useful to you as knowing when your particular audience is online. So you can use these services to find that out and to adjust your strategy as such. As I mentioned before, by running contests and promotions in social, you can extract and own user data. Here you can see a members directory with far more information than just names and emails. We even write down to Facebook pictures that are pulled right off. You can find out other information as well that are auto-populated into entry fields so that your audience doesn't have to manually enter them themselves. It makes it a little bit easier than having just web forms on your website. You can also do things like break down genders and age groups, as well as drill down to specific cities, counties, and neighborhoods to see where your fans live, which is pretty useful for deciding where to hold local events or live remotes. So, are you overwhelmed yet? There are tools that will help, and I've mentioned a few of them already. So I'm just going to go through a list of different tools that will make it much easier for you to execute and manage a social strategy. First off, publishing tools let you schedule posts in advance. They also help you manage your social accounts from a single dashboard. Monitoring tools come hand in hand with publishers, where you can monitor multiple accounts at once from a single dashboard, and you can also do things like track sentiment and respond immediately when necessary. And contest engines, they let you run multiple types of contests at a very low cost, and you can also collect entrant information into a proprietary database. And finally, there are analytics tools that are aggregating post insights, demographics, and also even staff metrics that will help you manage your staff activity and increase efficiency. So here are the key takeaways. First off, discussion and interaction is key. Take advantage of the nature of social networks and really socialize with your audience. Also, post according to the networks you're using and the preferences of your audience. You can do that by constantly analyzing and course correcting as you go. And finally, collect user data that is valuable to your advertisers and adopt tools when you can and where necessary to increase efficiency and data collection. And before we move to the Q&A, I'd like to mention that all of the live examples shown within this webinar are clients of SoCast who use our social relationship management platform. All of the tools discussed in the previous slide are offered by us in a single dashboard, so if you'd like, we can chat about your needs following this webinar. Just get in touch with me. So here's my information for anybody who wants to get in touch, and what I'm going to do now is we're going to hold a Q&A. I'm going to open up, we've gathered some questions along the way. Let me just pull them up here. So question number 1, how do I persuade my followers to actually tune into my radio program? That's actually a question that we get quite a bit. Basically, as I said, your online strategy and your online content should be very closely aligned with your on-air content. So if you're engaging people online and they're aware that what's happening online is similar to or enhanced by, and vice versa, your on-air content, then you're already giving them an incentive to tune in. Also, ask people to tune in. Tease them to tune in. Use some of the tips shown in Facebook best practices to entice people to come online. As I mentioned before with Twitter, when you ask people, when you provide a call to action, they are much more likely to actually do as you tell them to. But we also have to keep in mind that if you use social as just a bulletin board to advertise and tell people what to do, they're not as engaged with you. So engage with them first. Have fun. That's what social is all about. And once you have them engaged and happy and excited online, they're far more likely to tune in. So the next question here is, how do you get around the Facebook restrictions on not being able to ask your followers to share your post. That's the thing with these rules. The old rules said that you couldn't like, comment, share anything. Now, when it comes to contests, you can like and comment on a post, but you can't ask people to like your page or share a post that has to do with a contest. However, if it's any other type of content to do with your station, you are most certainly allowed to ask them to share because it's not for any particular gain. If you want people to share a contest-related piece of content, then that's where third-party apps come into play. They do have built-in functionality where you can set it so that when people vote or enter, a box will automatically pop up with a pre-written message or one that can be altered by the user to share that information out to their network. Next question is, how do you go about setting up contest apps? Setting them up yourself, you'd still need to use a third-party engine, and there's plenty of services out there of all different complexities and costs. As I mentioned, we do have one of our own as well that was built specifically for radio. But if you wanted to execute one yourself, you pretty much have to be a very talented developer. So I actually have a ton of information that I can send you, Cole, and I do have your email address, so I will forward you some information about contest apps. And if anybody else wants more information, please do reach me. My email address is up on the board. And we'll go with one more question here. This one's more specific. Oh, good. How many times should I post to Twitter in a day? Good question. We didn't cover that one in this webinar. As we mentioned earlier, Facebook, you should post roughly 2 times an hour. When it comes to Twitter, it needs to be more frequent, and the reason why is because Twitter news feeds move extremely quickly. So we suggest and recommend to all of our clients to post 8 to 10 times per hour. That does seem a little bit daunting. It's more than once per 10 minutes. However, you remember that Twitter posts are very short and sweet and to the point, so you could easily fill up a mix of pre-scheduled and live tweets to cover an hour, especially if you have the right tools in place. It makes it a lot easier. So that's it for today. My information is up on the board. If you'd like any information about our services or our resources, we have tons of white papers and webinar recordings and other information that we can forward you. You can email or call me anytime. Our website is up, and so is our Twitter. And if you follow us at SoCast SRM, you'll be live and up to date on all of our future webinars and other resources that we release on a very regular basis. Thank you so very much for joining us. We appreciate it. And have a great day and weekend.